Hey everybody, welcome to episode 7 of In the Shop. Okay, so today we are going to be looking at a CC. This is a 2-liter turbo TSI engine. This was brought to us by a customer requesting us to do a turbo install for them. So this was diagnosed at another place for us to do a turbo install for them. They just had a bad turbo, or at least that's what they were under the impression of. So we went through the process of installing a turbo. We installed a factory replacement turbo and then swapped it out. Upon test driving the vehicle, John at the shop found that the car still has no power. It was originally replaced because it had no power. It was diagnosed as such because it had no power. So once it went through the diagnostic process, obviously it was making no boost, had no power. That's why they replaced the turbo. We replaced it, verified it, went to test drive, still no power. So then we went down the process of trying to figure out how the vehicle was making no power. So John went through and looked at data logging to look at actual versus requested boost, which is what you would do in the diagnostic process of that. So if your vehicle is underpowered and you have a turbo, you want to make sure the turbo is actually working, which is usually going to be the best outcome of what you would have in those circumstances. A turbo car that has no power almost certainly has something related to the turbo that's a problem. One note I wanted to make around the boost pressure is we have our graph here which shows actual versus requested. In this vehicle, this is just an example that we had on a previous video we shot. In this example, if you had what we ended up having on this vehicle, because we didn't actually take a log on that, it would have your actual would be a more flat line and your requested would be going up. So that is an easy way to determine if you do not have boost being produced by a vehicle. In this case, it was still making no boost, so he was looking at actual boost versus requested boost, and he's getting readings of somewhere I believe it was around 1,000 millibar actual, and then roughly around I think about 2,000 was a requested. So just for context, that's millibar. It does translate into PSI and or bar, but the vehicles do read at atmospheric pressure plus the actual boost pressure. So when you translate those numbers to what you actually see in real life, it seems like higher boost numbers than what you think, because standard at sea level barometric pressure 14.7 psi. So you're going to have that number plus whatever your other number is to make your total boost pressure requested. So what you think might be requesting 22 psi might only be 8. Because you're doing the math between the two. So just for context there. So when we test drove the car, it was still making no boost. Requested versus actual, it basically had either a massive boost leak or something else going on. We went through the process of looking at that. My first thought when John and I talked about it was that there was no obvious boost leak that was usually that would result in like a hissing noise or something like that. He replaced the PCV valve just to swap it out to verify that we didn't have an internal boost leak, because it will blow boost inside the crankcase if you were to have a PCV valve that has failed in that way. That did not resolve the issue, and which left us scratching our heads, mostly because if you have a problem with boost, you either have an N75 valve problem, which is what controls the wastegate. You have a diverter valve problem, which is what recirculates the boost when you let off the throttle, and then you have your turbo. Outside of that, as long as there's no boost leaks, you're generally going to be scratching your head wondering why this thing isn't making boost, which is exactly what we did. So John actually talked to another tech friend of ours just to get an idea of kind of if he had ever seen anything similar to this. And he mentioned that he had another tech at their shop who had an issue with a car that had a clogged cat. Now, we had the cat off the vehicle, but because obviously we weren't replacing the cat or diagnosing anything, we never actually looked at the cat. So let's take a look at the cat. Okay, so what we found in this vehicle when we pulled this cat off is, this is obviously the old one, here's our new one side by side, and this cat is almost completely solid. So you can see here when you kind of rub your finger across it, it turns white, but this is solid black here, and there is almost no flow coming through this cat. The question is what would cause this to be solid like this? And just for an idea, around the edge here, there is some honeycomb that you can see. If you look at this cat, this fresh one, you can see that this is kind of a honeycomb pattern. There's a lot of holes in there. There is almost none of that visible in the old Cat, except for around one portion of the edge here. My assumption is most likely this vehicle has probably had a misfire for an extended period of time. So what happens is when you have a vehicle that's misfiring, it's running rough, check engine lights flashing, and it's going to be dumping unburned fuel because it's not firing properly and dumping all that fuel that is spraying into the cylinder into the exhaust. When that happens, all that's going to do is get inside this catalytic converter and get extremely hot. So the main risk you run whenever you have a misfire in not fixing it is going to be destroying your catalytic converter, is the most likely cause of that. So you can see what kind of the result, and my assumption is this probably didn't happen just by driving 100 yards with a misfire. This probably happened with a long period of time. This vehicle was neglected with a misfire that they didn't address, probably either injector related or possibly coil related. This is the result of it. So unfortunately, this customer just purchased this vehicle fairly recently as a used car, and this is one of the unfortunate results of what happened, most likely due to a misfire. Okay, so you see where we have our clogged Cat, which when we look at it makes sense why we have no boost, because it can't flow any exhaust gas past there, which is not allowing the turbo to spin properly, making any boost. Now here's the knee-jerk reaction, I think, for most people is that the shop who diagnosed it misdiagnosed it, and that the turbo is never bad. The one thing I will say is, while the turbo may not have been a direct cause of this issue, I can say it's very likely that at least I would have some questions about the likelihood that turbo had some issues relating to all the heat that was probably trapped due to all the flow, or the lack thereof, going through this Cat. So all that exhaust heat would be trapped in that manifold on that turbo, which could potentially have created some issues and concerns around that. So my assumption is that while the turbo may not have been a direct cause of this issue, the fact that it's been replaced is certainly not a bad thing and can ensure that this vehicle will not have any future issues. Thanks so much for watching our In the Shop. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more like it.